Um, if you guys are ready, I'll just do a quick overview.
Yeah,
Um,
you should feel free to go
so
ahead.
yeah, so uh, uh, anyone heard the term mise en place?
Yeah.
Yeah, sweet. So mise is essentially a way of saying, do you have everything in order? Do you have all your stuff? Um, before I make dough, I weigh and measure everything. I use a food scale. Uh, uh, I was reading a blog post on pizza.com, which is the one of the oldest blogs for anything on the internet. Um, uh, Somebody said if you do a heavy-handed measurement using a measuring cup, as opposed to weighing it out, your pizza could be anywhere from 68% hydration, which means using the same recipe, if you use a measuring cup, 68% of the dough is water, or if you're heavy-handed, it could be as little as 43%. And so you've got a huge, wide varying swing of hydration levels. And we will get to it shortly about why hydration matters. The dough I am making right now is a 62% hydration, give or take. We've got uh, olive oil. Olive oil coats the granules of flour. You end up with a nice chewy crust as opposed to dry and not crumbly necessarily, but you end up with just a bit more depth of chew. So if you've ever had that great pizza that's like, man, this crust is just, it's got a great bite to it. That's usually because they're using olive oil. Uh, salt, salt is important for flavor, but it also slows down fermentation. And for this recipe, sugar. Sugar is a nice way to get caramelization without the process of autolyse. And I'll talk about autolyse in just a little bit. So first and foremost, we are going to get our big bowl, and we are adding 232 grams of water to this. I do everything in grams because pounds and ounces just confuse me. I'm like, okay, how many ounces in the pound? It's 16. Okay. But I need a cup of that. So that's 8 ounces. I mean, learn the metric system and you'll never have a problem baking ever again. So I already got some water out. The water is intended to be 100 degrees. So this hot water is about 115 right now. And the cold bowl should be able to cool it down to where we need it. So 232 grams. I'm heavy-handed myself. Hold on one second. Just scoop that out a little bit.
This is why I didn't want to make it. It's really cool because it's like just science.
All right, perfect. So once we do that, every baker's best friend is a thermometer. When we make our dough, or we feed our sourdough, and I'll talk a bit more about this once we get this started because we'll have 10 minutes of waiting time. We feed our sourdough with 50-degree water so that it takes a really long time to proof overnight. And then once in the morning, it's fully risen and ready to use, as opposed to using a dead starter. And I don't know if you guys have used any sourdough in the past, but sourdough that is, hold on one second, sourdough that is risen and then fallen and collapsed, it's not as powerful as a freshly risen sourdough. If you go onto my Instagram, there's a nice video of my sourdough during COVID that I took a time lapse, and you can see it rise all the way, and eventually it just sort of peaks out and stops rising. And that's because the sourdough has consumed all the sugar and all the food that it can. So what we are going to do, go ahead.
Explain what you meant by a dead one. How is that? Who's doing that? If your kitchen isn't, who does that with a dead one?
So there's nothing wrong with I called it a dead starter. Really, it's a mature starter in that it rose and it peaked and then it dropped back down and sort of it already reached the peak of it's sort of like a bell curve. If anyone
Yeah.
remembers math class in the top of Fuller. I don't know if they still have math class up there. I'm just guessing. So you want to use a sourdough starter at the peak of the bell curve before it drops down, because that's when you have the most active and as many yeast cultures as you possibly can. Within a matter of hours, those yeast cultures will start to die off because they don't have any food to eat. And so the way you get it back is you feed it again, give it more food. It's going to restart that bell curve and pop up.
How do you know if you're at the peak?
I don't know if I can, let me see if I can find the video real quick. It's about doubling in size. Doubling size, if you have 100% hydration starter, where it's a 1-to-1 ratio of water to flour, that's how you know your sour. If it doubles in size, that's how you know your sourdough has sort of hit its peak.
That makes sense. I feel like I've heard that before. Hi, Dr. Zakaro, welcome.
Hi, James. I just
Hello.
watch everybody. Hi, George.
Hi.
It's
How's
going
it
to be
going?
fun for me to learn. And at some point, I'm going to stop into your restaurant because my son lives in Centennial, and when we
Oh,
drive
nice.
to Breckenridge, I'll come by.
Oh, that'd be great. Please let me know. I'm going to share my screen real quick so you guys can see this video I've got of my starter. There we go. So this is a time lapse. You can see that it's starting to grow, and then it really starts to pick up steam once the yeast cultures start to proliferate and grow. I put 2 rubber bands because I started at the first rubber band, and then by the end, it should double in size volumetrically. So, yeah. So you can see me walking around in the background the whole time. And then right about there, you can see all those bubbles, all that carbon dioxide that's being produced by the yeast strains. You can see that it's starting to peak and then collapse down a little bit at the end there. That's how you know it's starting to reach its peak of carbon dioxide production, which is when, yeah, there's the sourdough bread that came from it. So, yeah, so that is yeast sourdough cultures in a nutshell, but we can talk more about that in a second. All right, so I've got my water. I'm taking a whole bag of instant or active dry yeast. There you go. Because I know I'm going to use this within an hour, I'm just going for all of it. If this is going to be 2 hours or maybe a 3-hour delay between making it, the more time you have for dough creation, the more flavor you get. The sugar is yeast's food, so adding sugar provides a little bit more food for it to consume. And we're going to leave this at 100 degrees. The water was 100 until it gets nice and bubbly. I do have to admit, though, that is an old bag of active dry yeast. So if I have to, I'm going to use a little bit of instant yeast just to help it along. So nice and mixed. And we'll set that aside for 10 minutes. So I'm just pulling up my class notes because having a rubric is what Amy Lanterman taught me. Does anyone know, and I don't want to assume anything, does anyone know the difference or why there's a difference between sourdough yeast cultures and active dry yeast or instant yeast? If not, totally fine. I am here to explain. So active dry yeast, instant yeast, just different strains of yeast cultures that have been commercialized and put into little packages. You can buy them in active dry yeast in huge blocks, about 20-pound blocks from Cisco, and you keep that in a refrigerator, and you've got about 2 weeks to use it. So that's for heavy hitter bakeries. The nice thing about sourdough yeast cultures exist on your hands. They exist in the air. There is a sourdough culture museum, I think, in Norway or one of those Scandinavian countries. They've identified somewhere in the realm of like 8,000 different strains that they've categorically said these are different strains. They're not just the same thing found in a different area. So when people say, oh, is that a sourdough? Is that a San Francisco sourdough bread? It's because they're alluding to the fact that most sourdough breads are using the same culture in San Francisco. Very funny. Most people assume that once you have a strain of sourdough, it's going to remain that way for the rest of its life. You feed it, it's going to keep on growing. It couldn't be more further from the truth. We started with one strain of sourdough at Tin Plate at the restaurant. And my dad tells me this all the time. He's like, you know, that sourdough, when we first opened, it was so good. I don't know what you've changed, but it's just, James, come on, you got to get it back. I'm like, we live in a mountain town. Like, we're getting like alpine cultures from, you know, from all the trees and the fresh air. I mean, this is what we've got to use. Really, the only way that you can impact the flavor of a sourdough is what you feed it. You know, you are what you eat, right? So for our pizza sourdough, we use just an all-purpose flour from Sir Galahad, or it's called Sir Galahad from King Arthur milling. I forget exactly what it's called in the store, but any all-purpose from King Arthur at the store is exactly what we use in the restaurant just to feed the sourdough starter. Because the way you feed a sourdough starter, I don't mean to jump around, you start with, let's say, 10 grams of your sourdough starter. To feed it, you add 10 grams of water and then another 10 grams of flour, and you end up with 30 grams. And then once that's hit its bell curve and peaked and then dropped down, you feed it again. Now it's 30 plus 30 grams of water plus 30 grams of flour, and it peaks and drops down. Eventually, I mean, it's exponential. You just keep on adding more and more. You're going to have way too much. And so to keep a sourdough starter healthy, you're just feeding it just enough to keep it alive. I think 10 grams is a perfect amount. It's the smallest little bit that I used to put in, forgive me. I'll just put it in a glass. I used to have jars that smooth on the inside so that it wouldn't harbor any bacteria. And we'll get to that in a second too. Smallest little bit, 10 grams, 30 grams of water, 30 grams of flour, you know, combined. It's a very small amount. So I would feed it, if I wasn't going to bake, 10 grams, 10 grams, 10 grams, have 30 grams. The next day I would get rid of 20 grams of flour and water, you know, 20 grams of the starter, and start over. Now I've got 10 grams and start over again. And I would just do that cycle. And that's what you do that daily. At the restaurant, we do it 3 times daily because we're making dough every day. It keeps it really healthy. You've got constant supply of food for the yeast. It's really active. The more yeast you have, the less bacteria, which is always a nice thing to have. So what is a sourdough starter? It is a perfect combination of yeast to bacteria at a 1 to 100 ratio. For every one thing of yeast, there's 100 bacteria that isn't bad bacteria. It's a bacteria that eats the food and provides what's the byproduct of working out in your muscles? Lactic acid. It's creating lactic acid, acetobilic acid, all these different versions of acids coming from these bacteria. That's what gives it the flavor. It's not necessarily the yeast that's producing all this flavor in sourdough. It's really the bacteria. It's just that yeast does a really good job of keeping bacteria in check, so it's never bad, so to speak. Of course, if you let it sit out for a while, it's like mayonnaise in the sun. It's not great. So take care of it and it'll take care of you. So that's really the biggest difference, is there's no bacteria in this creating extra flavor. There's no lactic acid producing floral notes or acetic acid producing these sour notes that, you know, that combine to create this amazing aroma bread and baking. So that is why the headache that exists in sourdough baking is worth the effort. So that's really the difference between the yeasts.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely. Please jump in.
So you're keeping this 10 grams cycle going. Are you using the
Yep.
20 grams that you take away and actually putting that to baking? Like, at what point are you taking this thing and using it?
Yep. So we have a feeding schedule, and I'll just tell you the exact feeding schedule we use for the restaurant. We start with 200 grams of sourdough, 200 grams of flour, and 200 grams of water. We get 600 grams total. What you don't want to do when you're preparing to bake is discard. So that was the 10 grams, really just 10 to 30. That's just your maintenance. That's, hey, every day, unless I'm going to bake soon, I'm just doing this. The second you know you're going to bake, like, hey, I'm going to bake Sunday bread. It's going to be awesome. You start to grow and expand, and it's exponential, right? So you decide what your feeding schedule is going to look like. For us, our schedule is feed at 8 a.m., 200, 200, 200. That gives you 600. At 4 p.m., we take that 600 grams we've created, add 600 flour, 600 water. Now I've got 1,800. And then we feed it once more at 9 p.m. with really cold water, not cold enough to shock it and hurt the yeast necessarily, but cold enough to slow it down, because we're going to use it in about 9 hours. So we need it to be a slow bell curve. Cold water creates a slow bell curve. Hot water creates an instant product, which, if you can't tell, that yeast wasn't great. So I'm going to add some instant yeast to speed things up a little bit, just FYI. So we'll mix that in. We'll let it rise, and we'll use that in a second. So
when you are getting ready to bake and you've grown your sourdough, like how much are you taking away to actually bake something?
So
to leave left, just like the 10 grams?
Absolutely, yeah. So we do it. So if the end product is 5,600 grams, we use 5,400. So we've got the 200 left over to immediately start that 8 a.m. feed. So we have as minimal waste as possible. I had a lot of people when we first opened that would say, oh, it's no big deal. And they would feed it to 7,000 grams. But then that 3,000 grams that's remaining, give or take, is just, it's not great. It's not good. So our feeding schedule would slow down, and the yeast product was a little bit subpar. So now we're on a really good schedule. But yeah, incrementally growing your yeast at a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio, as opposed to bulk feeding, is what I would like to call it, which everyone gets in a pinch and they want to make bread tomorrow. It's no big deal. You take that 30 grams and you add 800 grams of water, 800 grams of flour, and go to town. In those situations, I would suggest using warmer water just to help that yeast rise faster. Does that make sense? Yeah. Any other thoughts before I jump on?
Yeah, so if and when you
Yeah.
have like discard, do you ever do anything with that discard? Like I
Oh
know
yeah.
like crackers or like a little pancake. Like what's your favorite thing to make with that excess?
Waffles.
Oh, really? Are they like savory waffles?
Sorry, say it again.
Are they savory waffles or like normal waffles?
No. They're normal waffles. You're putting syrup, all the fun stuff on there. Let me. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. He just came out with this amazing book, but of course I can't. I just bought it too. Ugh. He started a blog, sourdough bread blog. 1 second. The Perfect Loaf.
That's the name of the blog.
Yeah, The Perfect Loaf is the blog. When I say this, I've watched this blog over the last 6 years just completely take off. He won a one of those baking award or those cooking awards. They've got a house in New York City that they always have the events at. Gosh, I'm blanking on everything today. But the Perfect Loaf is the ultimate place to go if you're trying to get into sourdough baking. It's where I started. How people, feed their starters, how you keep it healthy. He's got a full guide and facts and amazing recipes. He just came up with that cookbook that I mentioned. Anyways, go to Perfect Loaf. My favorite discard is or recipe is discard waffles. He's got pumpkin pancakes.
Oh wow.
I will send it to you. It's amazing. Anyways, I'll make sure that info gets to you because that recipe has convinced me that eventually we will have a breakfast at Tim Plate so that we can just use the discard and make waffles. That's all I want to do.
That's
That's
awesome.
amazing.
Yeah. But yeah, the discard recipes are all over the place. But waffles are my favorite. Any other questions before I jump on?
I'll
All
go.
right. Cool. So give me 1 second. I'm gonna grab one book. All right. This is one of the books that started, oh, there it is. That started me off. Peter Reinhardt is an amazing baker, and he's the one that won that award a long time ago. What was it? It doesn't matter. Anyways, there's an amazing story in regards to Peter Reinhardt. In the 90s, he went to this bakery on West 4th Street in New York City. And he didn't live in New York. He was, I forget exactly where he was living, but he made bread in this, small little shop, Amy's Bake Shop, and this woman, Amy, let him use her ovens. And someone left the door open the night before. When they left for the night, leaving the bread rising, they left the door open. It got cold and nothing was risen. And so he's about to compete for the best bread baking, best bread ever. For gosh, I can't even remember the name of this organization. It's a nonprofit. Doesn't matter. Anyways, he ends up getting there at 5 a.m. and he needs to have his bread to the judging by 8 a.m. I think, and nothing's risen. And he turns on every oven to full blast, leaves every oven open, and just heats up the bakery to no end. Ultimately, 7:53 a.m. the bread comes out, and his buddy, he's like, I'll never be able to thank him enough. He drove faster in New York City than anyone has ever driven in New York City. And they got there just in time. He dropped off the bread. He won. And that got him to France because if you win this award, apparently you get access to meet with anybody that's part of the network to learn baking. And so he went to this French Institute of Baking. And what he found was, as opposed to, and this is 1994, before artisan baking was a big thing. I mean, I feel like artisan baking hit its peak in 2017, but in 1994 it didn't exist. It was just like, yeah, I get Wonder Bread from the store. What's the big deal? This guy goes to France and finds out that the U.S. has completely commercialized everything, just like Henry Ford intended. And the process is really broken, just fragmented. There's no love and care for any of the bread in the U.S. And so he gets to meet with this guy, takes him to this factory, and the factory is incredible. It's huge, but there's no mechanical parts anywhere. It's all stone earth ovens with a pile of wood and one baker baking about 800 loaves of bread per day.
Oh wow.
And there were, I think in the story that he writes in this book, I think there were 10 of, like in a circle, 10 of these with a master baker in the middle, just watching all these apprentices go to work, baking all this bread. And that morning they would send it all out to, the various, shops that needed it. What he learned there, and this is why I have this segue, the importance of autolyse. Autolyse is the process in which you add water to flour and you hydrate that flour that has been dried to no end and allow the sugars to naturally separate from the flour itself. Why is this important? Well, it gives more food for the yeast to eat, but you get all this extra sugar that didn't exist before, or wasn't separated from the flour. It's now free roaming in the dough and available to caramelize and create extra flavor. And so he was surprised to see that there was no cane sugar added to any of the breads in this factory. He's like, this is just crazy. I mean, sugar and bread is what made the US great. So he's got a full section devoted to autolyse. So how do you do it? About 60 to 70% of your water, you would leave, if we were to take this water, take all the flour and mix 60 to 70% of this water into the flour and leave it covered overnight and just let the dough just naturally hydrate. In the morning, you would add the rest of the water to it. And in that process, you've hydrated the flour, the sugars have separated from the brands, and if you're using a whole wheat, and you end up with this really beautiful outside crust. His recipe for baguettes is unparalleled. It's amazing. We are going to see how this does. I'm really sorry, guys. I prepared terribly bad, not very well. There's not a whole lot of yeast going on. I think what happened is my kid was playing with this and air got to it, and so it went bad. So I'll at least show you the process of what this looks like. So there's a lot of product on the bottom, so I'm mixing it together just to well incorporate it and pouring that directly into the flour. We've got remaining in the ingredients, we've got salt and we've got olive oil. Extra virgin. Do not try to use canola oil. You'll end up with a really hard, biscuit. It's something you want to give to your dog. I know that only because 2 days ago, we made a batch of dough. It was all garbage because somebody used a blend of 49% canola oil, 51% olive oil, and it was terrible. So what I'm going to show you guys are the Rhubarb method of mixing. You can certainly use a commercial mixer. What I like to do is just get your hands dirty because you're going to learn what good dough feels like. You'll start to feel it firm up. If you're using a KitchenAid, you don't get to experience that. And so you'll have less knowledge to decide what you need to add more or less of if the dough isn't doing well. So we're just mixing it together into a shaggy mass. And what I mean by that, you'll see in a second. So you can see it's coming together and it's kind of shaggy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that is your shaggy mass. Once you've got your shaggy mass, add in your salt, and that's going to firm things up pretty well. So add in your olive oil, and that olive oil is what gives you that nice, great chew. So if you want something a little bit more light and airy and not too heavy, then yeah, you would be totally fine to just not use olive oil. If you don't use olive oil, use more water, since it is part of the hydration factor for a dough. So I'm just mixing it together, and I tell you, I'm going to add a little bit more water because I can tell it's pretty dry. Give me 1 second. There we go. I'll mix it all together, grab everything off the sides. And I'm using what I like to call the pinch method. I'm taking it into my hands like this and putting my thumb and forefinger together and pinching it and breaking it into two pieces. That helps make sure that everything is broken up and well mixed into each other. So, add just a little bit more water. The hard part with baking and the hard part with flours is that there are different, it's not a hydration factor, it's a different absorption factor. So there are differing flours absorb water in different ways. And so while a recipe will be like, okay, do this exactly this way, you might end up at the very end and be like, this doesn't look anything like a sourdough. What's going on? Like, it's so dry, it's not working well. What's the deal? It's very likely just a water issue. So either add more water, add more flour, until you get exactly what you're looking for. And I've gone and added a little bit too much water. So I am using Justo's High Performer flour. This is a really nice flour out of, they're based in San Diego, but they've got mills all over the country. But you end up with a 14% protein. And protein is really what differs between baking a bread versus baking a cake. Cake flour is named cake flour for a very good reason. It's very light. It's got low protein content, and so you end up with very airy, very airy dough. Whereas with this, you end up with a chew. You end up with that bite that everyone wants in their dough and in their breads and their pizzas. So, shaggy mass is now complete. We are going to let that sit for just a little bit and let that combine. Usually I wash my hands, but I'll probably get back to this in just a second. So, yes, you got it exactly right. James Beard Award winner. I just saw that, Nicole. Yeah, the James Beard Foundation is incredible. So, yeah, anyways, Maurizio, the blogger on Perfect Loaf, won for best blog, and I think he might win for best cookbook this year as well, but we'll see.
Is that the one that you held up, the Perfect Loaf?
No, Bread Baker's
Oh, I'm sorry, the one
Apprentice.
yeah.
I think he won. Yeah, yep, he won an award for that book, but he won an award for baking separately.
Oh,
So he
cool.
won the award, and then he made this book, detailing the aspects of dough that he thought most important, and that cookbook won an award in its own right. So we've left it for just a little bit. The reason I did that is just giving time for this flour to hydrate. So the rhubarb method, you're going underneath, I'll try to get in there, and pulling away and sort of going over the top of itself. But you're doing it you're sort of stretching it and bringing it back on itself and aligning the gluten. The gluten are the protein strands. Right now, they're all, you can see in my hand, they're all mixed up and it looks like a massive DNA that hasn't met its chromosomal pair, I guess. So right now we need to find those pairs, get them aligned, and go from matchsticks to a forest. When you go to the forest, you get gluten and extensibility, and you can stretch your dough out. If you ever have issues with the dough tearing, it's because you don't have enough gluten. The hard part with sourdough, and I'm just gonna mix while we do this. The hard part with sourdough is that it naturally wants to eat the gluten and tear apart whatever gluten you've developed. So to create enough gluten during our mix, it takes 3 hours coil folding and stretching the dough and folding it on itself. I'll show you what that process looks like in a second. 3 hours worth of it every 20 minutes, just to build enough gluten so that we don't tear it.
Do you do it by hand?
Yeah, the coil folds, yes. The initial mixing, like what I'm doing here, we use a machine. Yeah, like I said earlier, it's a lot of weight, 107 or 83 kilograms of dough every time. So it's a human being being rolled around in this machine we've got. So you can sort of see it. It's looking less shaggy now that I've been doing those stretching, the Rhubarb method. By all means, Google it. I don't get hands-on with dough enough anymore. But you can see I'm just pulling it away from the bowl and bringing it back to the front. And then I'm turning it 90 degrees and doing it over here. How you know you're doing it well is that it starts to pull away from the bowl. And you can see I've got extensibility, a little bit of tearing, but that's okay. So. Let's see, what else? So we've covered autolyse, covered the importance of sourdough for flavor. If you don't use sourdough, you can still get flavor. I highly suggest you look up a 72-hour pizza dough recipe, because that time that the dough spends in the refrigerator, it pauses the yeast, but provides any bacteria that's in the dough to create additional acids of flavor, and the sugars also become more free floating, so to speak. So you get better caramelization after 72 hours versus after 1 hour of what we're doing today.
So is what's happening there, if you leave it in the fridge for a little bit longer, could you call that fermenting or like aging? Like what is that actually called?
Yeah, so any cold dough is really an act of fermentation. You're allowing bacteria to get to the food source, grow and then die off, and in that process, they're creating additional flavors. So it's very much a fermentation process. So you can see all that effort. It's now, when I pull it apart, it's coming together. That is gluten strength in a nutshell. Is this stuff just, it's not tearing, it's not shaggy. We're creating that forest, and that's how you end up with good dough. So now that it's coming together in a ball pretty darn well, I'm going to take some saran wrap and cover it, and then we can keep on chatting while that rests, because as you let it rest, those gluten strands, they really love to be together when when you've shaken them up a bit. It's like a soda can, it gets wild and crazy. So they're really tight together. As you let that soda can sit, the fizz settles and it just wants to relax. And that relaxation provides you opportunity to go from matchsticks to forest a little bit more. So let me just wash this hand real quick. What we'll talk about now, and actually, hold on. Wet towel works just as fine, just as good as saran wrap, and you're saving the planet. So what we'll talk about now is hydration levels and temperature. It's counterintuitive. This took me a bit of time to think about. The simplest explanation I can give for why the crust rises but the middle of the dough doesn't is purely because of the boiling temperature of water. When you put sauce down in the middle of a pizza, all that heat is transferring from the stone that it's sitting on, or whatever material it's sitting on. It is going through the pizza dough, and then that water content, your ingredients, the sauce, pepperonis, etc., are absorbing that from underneath and absorbing that all that heat. And so if you ever end up with a soggy pizza in the middle, it's either because A, they didn't use hot enough temperature, or B, too much ingredients. But now to the counterintuitive part. If you want a crispy pizza if you have a low temperature oven, you want a wetter dough. If you have a high temperature oven that's in the 700s, 800s, you want less water in that dough. Why is that? The water is a really good absorber of heat. It's absorbing all that heat really quickly from the stone. The more water you have, the faster that transfer of heat from the stone to the flour, to the oil, to everything else that's in the pizza, and the faster you get what's called oven spring. So today we're going to bake at 550 degrees. I also have an uni oven. I'll show you guys baking at closer to 800, 900 degrees. We're using the same hydration dough because 62% is actually 65%, and I've added a little bit of water. We're probably closer to 67. It's a really good medium. It can go one way, low heat pizza, sort of a la New York City style, where you get a nice golden brown, and I mean, New York City pizza is just amazing. Or it can go into a high heat oven like the uni at 900 degrees, and you end up with really fast oven spring, big bubbles, a nice dark exterior, and yeah, it's just beautiful stuff. So the hard part as a home baker with a 500 degree oven is that really, if you want optimal results, you would probably want to do a dough closer to 72 to 75% hydration. So 75% of all the ingredients, or it's versus flour weight. So if the flour weighs 1,000 grams, you're using 750 grams of water. So you have a 75% hydration against the flour content. The downside, it's really difficult to work with. There's a reason I don't use 72% hydration. I mean, it's sticky. It's a little bit, it's not difficult to work with. It's just, there's more room for error, so to speak. If you're at 65%, if you leave it out, if you don't cover it with a wet towel, or cover it with saran wrap in the restaurant because I don't have enough towels, then you have to worry about just water evaporating from the dough itself. There's a lot less to worry about from a quality standpoint. So I prefer 65 to 68%, 75% hydration. There's actually, that's the crazy part about where bread and dough are going in the future. What's his name? They make bread in San Francisco. They do a 120% hydration flour dough. So for 1,000 grams, they use 1,200 grams worth of water, and it's like a soup when you mix it up. It's just not doing anything. But they spend so much time developing gluten that eventually they can move it around. It's almost like those mixtures of water and cornstarch. I don't know if you guys ever play with that stuff, but it's sort of like that in the long run. So going back to our dough here, we'll just move this out of the way. So you can see already quite a fair amount of gluten buildup in there. So all I'm going to do is, I don't need to mix it anymore. We're going to do what's called a stretch and fold. Pull it away from itself up until the point of where it is starting to tear, and then fold it back on itself like you're folding a book. Turn it 180 degrees, dig underneath, grab that other end, I'll do it from that angle so you can sort of see across and right on top of each other. And then 90 degrees, you're doing the same thing. And then one more 180, and you're just sealing that letter, so to speak. So you can see when I pull it now, I mean, this is just there's almost no stretch. We essentially shook that soda can so that all the fizz, everything's really tight together. It wants to be tight. And now we're going to cover it again and give it just a few minutes to relax. And that's all you're doing is just building that gluten so you end up with a nice extensible dough that doesn't tear. Because when you spend all that time and effort, our day starts at 5 a.m. and then dough balling finishes at 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. If you don't get all that gluten, it's just you end up with the tearing. Your cooks are upset. They're yelling at you, and customers are unhappy because they don't have pizza. So take the time with gluten development. The way I've always felt about pizza, and mind you, Tin Plate as a restaurant is an upscale pizza place. Our cheese we do a 12-inch pizza. A lot of people in New York and the Midwest would say that's the personal pizza. That's what I get at the airport from Domino's. Those pizzas, by the way, are 8 inches. I've measured. Anyway, so 12-inch pizza, in my opinion, is a great size for 2 people to share with a salad and a glass of wine. But hold on just 1 second.
So you're saying that we're really hungry for 2 10-inch pizzas?
2 10-inch pizzas will do you great. Yeah. 12-inch are my favorite because 10-inch is when you're getting to the personal size. 12-inch is when you're getting to like a Domino's medium is about a 12-inch. The larges are pretty big. But what I was getting at is toppings. I've always felt that a pizza, you'd spend all this effort for sourdough bread, for sourdough pizza crust. I mean, I've got one person every day of the week spending 8 hours of their life just making dough. It's a lot of effort. So why would we put ketchup on a tomahawk steak that costs $130? You know what I mean? So ingredients are important. I've got all my ingredients from the restaurant. Caramelized onions. Take your time to get that flavor. There's natural sugars in onions, and caramelizing them is the best way to make sure that nobody's going to hate your pizza. Someone can say, I hate onions. They never say, I hate caramelized onions, in my opinion. And just whoever online started this trend of, oh, you can make caramelized onions in 15 minutes. That is a lie. It takes at least 4 hours. Tomato sauce. One of my favorite pizza makers is a guy by the name of Dan Richer. If you're ever in Jersey City, he owns the pizza place Raza Pizza. Modernist Cuisine is a cooking company, a test kitchen that also makes cookbooks. Their first cookbook was 1,600 pages on bread alone. I have not read that one, but I've heard it goes far more into depth than what I can give you tonight. They wrote a book called Pizza. It's probably going to win a James Beard Award this year. It came out, or it might have won last year, but it came out last year, October. They emphatically agree that Raza Pizza is tied for the best pizza in the world alongside another pizza place in Portland, Oregon. Dan Richer, the reason he's so successful is because my earbuds. 1 second.
It's the best pizza in the world.
What was the name of the pizza place? Oh, hold on. There we go.
There I am. Hey, sorry about that.
What was the name of the pizza place?
Raza Pizza, Razza. Raza Pizza Artigianale. So Dan Richer, the reason he's so successful is because he sources locally whenever he can. He and I use the same tomato company from Stanislaus. It's called Alta Cucina whole peeled tomatoes from Stanislaus. All we do is take it and puree it right out of the can. We don't do anything to it except add a little bit of salt, a little bit of olive oil. So it's incredible tomatoes. What he does to expand and be known as the best, he goes to the Stanislaus canning factories. And the way Stanislaus decides which tomatoes go to Alta Cucina, they have 3 conveyor belts, 1, 2, 3, and they've got all these people sorting tomatoes in terms of quality. The very top go into a separate onto a separate conveyor belt. So the best of the best go onto that. But then there's another sorting team that says, okay, some of these are going to be used for sauce because it's whole peeled tomatoes in sauce in tomato juice. Some of them are going to be peeled, and so they have it's a 3-step process to decide which ones are the very best. He goes to that canning factory and he taste tests every single quote unquote batch that he'll receive in 3 months from that date. And he'll say, I want this batch through this batch. I don't want that batch. I want this batch. And that's the best of the best. This factory's already said, hey, these are the very best in the world. You're going to love them. And he's going, no, I want these and these and these. Can you imagine I'm not going to say the word, but the cojones on that guy to go to the very best canning facility in California and be like, yeah, I'm going to tell you what's better. It's just, anyways, he's incredible. So Stanislaus tomatoes, I love them. We'll just keep on going down the list. Cheese. We make our own mozzarella in-house. We use Grande. Yep, there's the other cheese. Grande diced. There's no difference between diced and shredded. The only difference is 50 cents a pound. So we use diced because it's going to melt anyways. But yeah, we make our own mozzarella. What makes mozzarella that you make yourself so special is you get to use more salt, a little bit less salt than you would normally. Salt is an inhibitor of bacteria and makes things shelf stable. And so when you make it yourself, you get a really nice fresh loaf of mozzarella as opposed to very acidic and salty. So that is the reason we make our own mozzarella. Obviously, we also use processed, mozzarella from a company called Grande. The reason Grande is the very best, just like the Stanislaus tomato story, they work with their milk vendors, and they say, okay, you provide the milk. If you can meet these requirements, we will pay you more per gallon than we would otherwise. And so they are testing for cow health in regards to white blood cell count in the unprocessed milk. They're testing for any chemicals. They're testing for any antibiotics that might be present in the milk. The less that's in the milk and the more raw and natural it is, the more these suppliers of milk get paid. So they're encouraged to do the right thing, which I love that about Grande. Pepperoni. There you go. Ezzo Pepperoni is a company from out of New Jersey. Straight up incredible. These are their 28 millimeter. Sorry, I'll do it this way. These are their 28 millimeter cup and char. So what's really nice about these is they're going to cup up like this and create an edge. And the very tops of these are closer to the heating element. They get charred, a little blackened. It's delicious stuff. We're gonna make a fig and prosciutto pizza today. This is we take the Dalmatia fig jam that you can get at at a store and use for cheese boards. We use that same Dalmatia fig jam, cut it with a bit of water, and we use this as the base for our pizza. You get a really bright, awesome flavor, a bit of sugar. You couple that with prosciutto, and I mean, it's a match made in heaven. I mean, who doesn't want a cheese board for a pizza? So, those are the ingredients I've got. I wanted to talk about those because I have a pizza place that operates right next door to us. We are neighbors, and I kid you not, day one, we're looking at our kitchen this way, and they're looking at their kitchen this way as we make pizzas. And then eventually they came over and it was during a labor shortage, and so they started trying to poach our guys away from us. Our guys are still with us. It's been a year and a half, which is awesome. But how do you differentiate yourself from a pizza place that's been there since 1986? You beat them at their own game in regards to quality. I don't mean to toot my own horn, but we've got good stuff. So, all right, this has been resting. So you can sort of see now it's just stretching. We developed all that gluten. It's looking great. We're gonna, you can see one little tear right there. So we're gonna do it one more time. So fold it over itself. 180. Grab underneath. Do it again. And then after this, we will ball it, and then we can get to making some pizzas right now as we wait. I don't want to go too late. So let's make some pizzas. We'll use this in just a little bit. In the meantime, we'll use the sourdough pizza from the restaurant. Any questions? Been talking a lot. I don't mean to steal the show.
So you said that Radza pizza place was the best pizza in the world. What
Yep.
does that Neapolitan pizza organization think about that? The one where they say Neapolitan's the original pizza.
Oh,
You know what I'm
Yep.
talking about?
yep. I forget the acronym they use for themselves.
I'm not gonna try to.
It's like the DPSD or something like that. The Neapolitan Foundation based in Naples that say if you use any sort of oil, you're not Neapolitan and you're doing it the wrong way. So Modernist Cuisine, the cookbook I told you about that said they're the best pizza in the world, they actually go through a history of pizza going as far back as 1437, trying to figure out, when did things first start to come together as far as pizza. Pizza in Italy didn't become pizza in Italy until the 1960s. They started pizza, but for the first 150 years, they thought nightshade plants, tomatoes, were bad for your health, and so no one would use them except for poor people. Which is a really crazy idea to be like, what's pizza without tomato sauce, right? And so pizza was a food for the masses, for the poor, specifically because all of these foods existed that no one wanted to eat. I think, leave it to Italy in 1837 to be like, hey, we're gonna have fancy tomato, and they do pate and stuff, and I don't know, I'm making stuff up, but they very much didn't believe in pizza as we know it today. Fast forward about 100 years to the 1960s, and Italy's got a image problem. They've got a problem with tourism. They don't have anyone coming because they're worried about mafia families are starting to sprout up. They said, well, what better way than to just be like, you know what? We started pizza. It's Neapolitan pizza, and this is how you do it. So they created the foundation. I think in the 80s or 90s was when the foundation was really created as a means to say, hey, Neapolitan pizza belongs in Naples. It doesn't belong anywhere else in the world. We own it. And so that's why, and that was, I think, in direct relation to Chicago pizza coming up on on the map, and just different styles of pizza. They were like just trying to be like, you know what, the original pizza's from Naples. We promise. Don't worry about it. But yeah, that book I've got from Modernist Cuisine goes through all of that. And I was very surprised because I was like, yeah, Neapolitan pizza, that's the most amazing pizza in the world, right?
A recent phenomenon, yeah.
So what I will say about Raza is very, artisanal pizza. I am sure they don't subscribe to the Neapolitan way of doing things because Dan Richards' motto is, why keep things the same if you can make it better, right? So he is constantly improving and changing things up. For the longest time, he was doing a straight starter, 100% hydration, just like I do at the restaurant. In talking to him, he has moved to a stiff starter, which is a bit more difficult to do the math on because it's less water to flour ratio, but not in a exponential way. The stiff starter provides just a little bit more working yeast. He also uses old dough in his dough. So when this dough gets too old to use, or if he just needs to make dough, he takes a piece of dough just like this, throws it into his batch, and that becomes a stiff starter for his dough. So here's some awesome dough. It's a little bit overproof. You'd usually want to see it just a little bit more risen. Can't tell you how often that joke is made. He is risen. Okay. So the best way to stretch a dough, and if you guys want to grab your dough, by all means, we can do this together. I've got a little bit of flour here, so have some flour. You're just going to sprinkle some on there, and then just rub it around. Do that to both sides. I have semolina flour on the bottom of this, so that's the only reason I'm not doing it on both sides. So, yeah, a nice covering of flour, and we're good to go.
So does them resting their dough help make it more round to start with, like yours? Because I feel like mine always comes out looking like an amoeba.
So round pizza or round dough balls create round pizza.
Makes good sense.
If you take that dough from the grocery store and just sort of pull it out of the plastic, and it's kind of oblong and all over the place.
Is 100% what I do.
So go ahead and ball that, and I'll show you guys how to ball it once this is ready to go. But we'll make a pizza first. Just like I said in the beginning, have your mise en place ready to go so that there's no delay. So I've got our sauce out. If you have some sauces, by all means, grab those. And it's not a worry if you don't have it ready. It's okay. We're going to make a pepperoni pizza. There we go.
Are you essentially making dinner for tonight?
Yes, I've got 2 kids that are hungry.
Nice.
All right. So you guys have your dough. Just set it down. It's been and just no touching. Doesn't matter quite how big it's gotten. If it didn't spread at all, that's okay. What you're going to do, and in Italy, the crust is called the cornicione. I might be pronouncing that like garbage, but that's the American version for me. We're going to create the crust first. So if you guys just want to watch closely, all I'm doing is establishing that crust. And I'm saying to my staff, I'm saying to myself, do not touch this crust at all. You've spent all this time building up the fermentation, carbon dioxide. It's really puffy. I'll show you real quick. You can sort of see it's nice and puffy, and there's air bubbles in there. The more that you play with it, let me see if I can.
Should I, James, do you want me to take and unpin the one that looks straight at your face and make the one with your hands bigger?
Sure, whatever's easy.
Is that, are you trying, Would it be easier
No,
for you guys to see?
up to you guys. You want to?
I think it's okay as is, to be honest.
Okay. So
It's
now that
all-
I've established the crust, I'm not going to touch it. What I'm going to do is put my thumbs into that indent that we made, just pick up the dough, and I'm just moving it around like I am working like I'm a fake taxi driver in a 1970s movie.
That's exactly what this feels like.
Right?
Oh,
And you
nice.
bring that. Eventually, it starts to stretch out. Put it onto your hands, just like this. Sorry, let's see if I can. There we go. So I put it onto the top of my hands, just like this. So I'm hands like that. You're creating a cradle for this to rest on, and you're gently using your forefingers to further stretch out that dough. And you can do an overhand situation. This dough is very well proofed, and so you can see it took no effort at all, and I've got a crust.
Wow.
What happens if it tears? Because mine's gonna.
So if it tears, go ahead and set it down on your table, and you're gonna just do an overlap and press down to seal that. Like, take one piece, stretch it over the top, and press down with as little flour in that area as possible, and that will hopefully keep your pizza nice and relaxed. So I have to admit, I tried an Instagram, viral video about creating a cacio e pepe pizza using ice cubes on top of the pizza dough when you put it into the oven. Tried it, and it shattered my pizza stone because a little bit of ice got onto the stone and it just thermally blew up. So I don't have a pizza stone. What I have instead, I'll show you guys. I've got every single baking sheet that I've got. I've got more underneath. I've got more on top. The reason being, metal is a great conductor of heat. Oh, hold on.
Like,
So are you gonna put your pizza on something on top of all that?
I'm just going to put it directly on top of that. We're going to see how it goes.
how tricky is it?
Cool.
So,
You ever throw your pizza?
just for photography. I'm like, we spent all that time and effort making it so pretty. Like, I don't want to drop it. So
For the Instagram.
yeah, exactly. It was okay. I'm just going to go ahead and start getting to work on this while you guys
Yeah, go ahead.
stretch your dough. And that is, I'll be honest, that is the hard part with store-bought commercial dough, is they're like, at your house, not our problem. And so they don't spend a whole lot of effort to create that gluten. And so, anyways. So if you guys can listen, I'll go ahead and top this. I watched this video with Enzo. I'm blanking his name. The Neapolitan Pizza Foundation in Naples. Consider him like the godfather of that thing. I watched a video about how to top a pizza, and his perspective was, if you can see every element of a pizza, then you do not need to worry about putting too much on it. What I mean is, when you lay down the sauce, you can see the dough through the sauce. When you lay down the cheese, you can see the cheese, the sauce, and the dough. And when you lay down the pepperoni and any other toppings, you can see every element on top of each other all the way down to the dough again.
So if it's too soggy, is it probably because I'm putting too much sauce on it?
Sauce for sure, because the sauce, as I was mentioning earlier, that's what absorbs all the heat. So if you've taken all this heat out of the pizza stone and transferred it to sauce, but not to the crust, the crust is going to cook last, and you'll often overcook everything else in the process. I did have one more ingredient. Oh,
Should we put our pizzas on like the counter, or should we go ahead and put it on the baking sheet if that's gonna be what we're putting it on? Because we don't have like a pizza peel.
okay. So, do you have? Do you have a flat one that's with no edges?
No.
That's okay. So yeah, best bet. Do you have a pizza stone?
No.
That's okay. No, totally fine. That's why I'm excited to bake with no pizza stone. So best bet, preheat your, if you've got really good gloves, preheat this. Perfect. And you know what, we'll just do it the same, we'll do it together at the same time. I'm gonna move you guys over here.
What should we set the oven to, actually? That's another question.
As high as you can get.
So like, how high can a stone go?
Well, pizza stones can go up to 900, 1,000
Really?
degrees. I mean, if you get,
Visualizing my stones.
well, if you've got the oven to heat it that way, you can just keep on heating it as much as you want.
Underneath it.
So what I would suggest for you guys
Yeah.
is, and we'll do it together. Grab a plate, the flattest plate you've got, and we're gonna dress the pizza on that. But first, make sure that your dough isn't sticky at all. If it's
Okay.
sticking to anything at all, add flour.
Okay.
So I'm doing the same thing right now. I had some sticky spots, and then I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, once I put the flour down, I'm just using my hand to rub it around, picking it up, dusting it off, and directly onto the plate. And if you've got a 10-inch pizza, then you'll be totally fine to do this step.
That's gonna pretend to be the pizza one, and then we're gonna put that
So-
on top.
So funny story, right before COVID, it was January, I was pizza testing in my apartment in Hoboken, New Jersey, and had read all the blogs, and they're like, well, you know, you can really bypass the temperature on your oven and just keep it running for, to get it as hot as possible, up to 700 degrees, if you remove this part. So I went ahead and removed that part, and it was January, and I'm putting the pizza into the oven, and a little bit of sauce dripped onto the glass and completely exploded.
Whoa.
So I obviously had to get a new oven, but the new oven couldn't arrive until March 8th, right before COVID hit. And people are walking around with masks, so like, hey, I don't know if we're gonna do this delivery. I'm like, no, you have to, please. So, once you guys get your well-floured dough that isn't sticky, because you're going to take this pizza, you're gonna take that preheated, if this is hot, imagine this is hot. You're gonna take this off, and you're gonna slide this pizza onto the hot baking stone or baking pan. If it fits, I would suggest doing it on the bottom.
Okay.
Yep. Only because it'll be easier to get your pizza off when you're done.
Okay.
Yep. So if you've got your sauce and your ingredients ready,
I don't really understand what happened.
I can't tell you how much of stretching dough is just time and practice. 2 years ago, I would have been fumbling like you guys. But then you make 10,000 pizzas and you're like, yeah, it's pretty easy. Just kidding. Still difficult. This is if you have good dough. I'm going to go ahead and start dressing this. So for a 12-inch pizza, I like about 2 ounces of dough, or 2 ounces of sauce rather. And then we're just going to move it around. FYI, for pizza sauce, if you grab a regular can of whole peeled tomatoes from Walmart, to be honest, the Walmart brand is actually really good. What I used to do is dump the whole can into a bowl. Now just hand crush those whole peeled tomatoes and leave them exactly like as best, I didn't puree it. At the restaurant, we puree it because we find that most people, for some reason, have an aversion to that texture. But I absolutely love it. So you can see all elements of the pizza. You see the sauce, you see the crust. Now we're going to add some cheese. And you know what? I'm going to use our homemade mozzarella because it's really good. Big clumps of mozzarella. I'll do it on half, and I'll show you what the other half should look like. Nothing too close together. That for a margarita, that is plenty for half a pizza, because all that's going to melt and it's going to look fantastic. And then for shredded mozzarella, just going to spread this around a little bit. That's it. You can still see the sauce through the cheese. You can still see the dough through the sauce.
Nice.
That is a well-balanced pizza. I will say with pepperonis, it's all about knowing how they're going to behave in the oven. I know that these are they start at 28 millimeters. They're going to cup up and get smaller by about 4 millimeters per side. So when we make our pizzas in the restaurant for these guys, we actually put them right next to each other with minimal spacing. But that's only because I know it's going to cup up. Otherwise, I would suggest spacing similar to this.
No space.
Yeah. So if you can sort of see that.
Yeah, we're confident.
Perfect. And that is it. That is topping a margarita / pepperoni pizza.
Yum.
Nice, looks great.
Yeah. So we're gonna jump over to this side. Perfect.
Gotcha.
Awesome. Okay. Please don't burn yourself. But what I'm going to do is heat. One second.
Probably take longer because we're cooking 2 things in one oven.
Okay, so I just took the very top. I've got multiple in there. Just took the very top. Very hot. And I'm just going to lay this directly down on top. As long as it wants to go. Perfect. All right. We'll get this right back into the oven. It'll start absorbing heat right away. So putting on top of some other pans helps provide more heat through the process. All right. So sort of see it going in there. I'm going to turn on the light real quick. Get my a little messy. So you can see already that we're developing some air in the crust. Those little bubbles. And it's gonna take about 10 minutes, so we'll just let it sit for a little bit.
Oh, wow. How's yours looking, George? What'd you guys put on top of it?
Okay, wait,
The oven's still not done.
this is what
We'll show them off though.
I left no visibility of the sauce, no visibility of cheese, pepperonis, and then more cheese. That one's mine. I broke the rules on that one.
That's how I tend to make pizza, is breaking all the rules, apparently.
I want like 2 pounds of cheese, but that's just me.
Here's mine. Lovely.
Yeah, you can see all the elements. It's balanced.
I love it. I love it.
They look good.
So pizza is all about how you want to make it. What I mean by that is if you want it to be, if you really like fresh ingredients, by all means leave them fresh. Because we have such a high heat oven, we pre-bake or pre-roast all of our produce. So here are some cremini mushrooms.
Oh.
When you roast it at 500 degrees, which is what we roast everything at, it releases all this water, and we just keep on baking it until that water has essentially evaporated. The reason being because water is a conductor of heat. Yeah, it absorbs heat. It absorbs heat. Water absorbs heat tremendously well. So the less water we have in our ingredients, the better our end pizza. There we go. Is that better? Perfect. I'm going to show you guys how to ball dough real quick. Bring this back.
Oh, and I think somehow that one ended up not. Here we go.
Oh,
Perfect. Yeah.
awesome. So, let's see. Like I said, the food scale is my best friend. And we're just going to cut this up into 340 gram dough balls because I know that this dough is about that size for 2 dough balls. So you can see all that beautiful gluten. It's held together great. So yeah, 740, 300, and that's actually a lot. We're just going to do smaller dough balls. So 290 grams are my favorite size after testing a lot. So I'm just cutting the dough in half and just throwing it onto this zeroed scale. There's 214, 280, 286. That is perfect. So we've got this amazing dough. You can see this the gluten development in there as I cut it. The best way to ball it, up a little bit, there we go. You're taking your dough, stretching it apart, and pulling it up. And then, like a taco, you're just pinching it off at the top. So a chalupa, essentially. And then you're turning it 90 degrees and doing the same thing to that side. You'll see at the bottom, it's starting to really tighten up, getting a nice smooth outside. So turn to 90 degrees, grabbing it and just sort of pressing it up on itself. Once this is soft, or really smooth on the outside, you don't need to keep on doing it. You just grab whatever's, it looks like a mess in the bottom, right? You just grab it and pinch it sort of like, what was that, an Emmy Award or a Grammy Award nominated short, Bow or something from Pixar?
Yeah.
You're essentially making it into a little dumpling at the top.
Huh.
And on what will become the top now is your dough ball. and this is going to live. You can put it into your refrigerator to stop the yeast.
How quickly do you think you need to use the dough?
So since this one didn't have much active yeast because my yeast went bad, if it had been working, this stuff would have exploded in size. I'd be punching it down, which is that's a technical term.
Yeah.
Punch down the dough, and then I'd be dividing it and balling it, letting it rise maybe 15 minutes later. And then, sorry, hold on, I get feedback. Yeah, let it rise 15 minutes and then just use it right away. With the dough, with the recipe that I provided that uses yeast, I highly suggest just following that, throwing it in the oven or in the refrigerator, and then I think you have up to 72 hours to use it. And get a lot of great flavor the longer you wait. So there's another one. We used to handball all 200 dough balls every day. I got a machine for that because I was getting carpal tunnel and arthritis early. So you can see I did 2 size balls, one for the pizza. This one would turn into a great little loaf of bread. If you let it rise just a little bit, just throw it in the oven. Some homemade cultured butter. I can't tell you how easy cultured butter is. Everyone thinks it's impossibly difficult. It is so easy. Take cow's cream, add in Greek yogurt, a little bit of salt. Just shake it up a little bit or just mix it, and then let it culture at room temperature overnight. Leave it out.
On the counter.
On the counter. Yep. Cover it with a towel, and just let it sit out overnight. The next day, that cream is cultured, and because it's a yogurt, it's got cultures that'll prevent it from getting nasty too quickly. Put that into a KitchenAid with a whip, the wire whip, and then just put that on high. Look out, because eventually the buttermilk separates from the buttercream, and once it's separated, strain out all the buttermilk. Set that aside. Use it for making your homemade ranch, which is what we do, ranch dressing. And then that butter, whatever's left, is cultured butter, ready to eat.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah. That is by far our most popular dish. It is just bread and butter. And we take little bread loaves like this and bake them off and serve butter that we let culture overnight.
Wow.
Let's take a look at this pizza. Ooh, it's looking good. Nice, beautiful
Ooh,
Crust.
it does look good.
crust.
Nice and bubbly.
Yeah. So now it's grabbing the spatula, and we're just gonna check the bottom. And you can see there's barely any flop, so this thing is just about ready to pull. I like a little bit more color on my crust, so I'm gonna leave it just a little bit longer. Oops, sorry. There we go.
All right, ours are in, by the way. We'll see how it goes.
Awesome. That's great.
And we added some olive oil and garlic powder
Nice.
to the crust, just because we were feeling.
Not bad. Got get a little flavor. I love it.
Nice.
So yeah, if you're going to leave these balls to be overnight, or you can freeze them for future use. My favorite way to freeze them is those soup containers from like a Chinese restaurant. They're like plastic ones. You can do that. Cover this with oil. Take some olive oil, cover it all over, lay it directly into that, and freeze it. And then when you want to use it, pull out that whole container, leave it in the fridge to thaw for a day or two. And then this will be perfectly thawed and ready to rock and roll.
No kidding. Wow.
Otherwise, I would suggest putting it onto a plate. A dinner plate is great, probably 2 or maybe 2 to a dinner plate. A little bit of flour, and then saran wrap on top. And that is, and then yeah, use it within 72 hours or freeze it before then. Yeah, that is it. I'm gonna take this pizza out real quick.
Do you guys have leftover pizza dough too?
Over here? Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to figure out something to do with it.
So
Ooh, that does look good.
Oh, the pepperonis look amazing.
They do.
yeah, those cup and chars are really good, but you can see what I meant by
Like curling.
how they curl up and get smaller.
Yeah.
So over here is what most people would put on, but if you did that in the restaurant, someone would say we're jipping them, and so we have to do that one.
And that mozzarella really melted and spread too. That looks really good.
That's the one thing. At a lower temperature, it spreads more. At a higher temperature, with a margarita pizza that most people associate with Neapolitan, it creates it doesn't let it spread nearly as much. So that whole milk mozzarella that we make ourselves, you can see the clumps of it, but it really separated from the fat, and so that's why it spread out a lot. I own a pizza place, but I don't have a pizza cutter. It's not one that I can find. So, yeah. Ideally, I'm going the wrong way about this, but just want to show some for this temperature cooking. That crumb is actually pretty good. There's that. That's a little bit better. Yeah, you can see that's called the crumb of the crust, the airiness in it. So, to make sure your pizza doesn't get too soggy too quickly, I like to leave it on just a little baking rack, and that prevents water absorption on the bottom. So that's what we do at the restaurant, directly from the oven onto one of these for 2 minutes, and then we cut it and dress it. So
Dress it.
any final expo items. So if we were doing a margarita pizza, we'd have basil to put on.
Oh yeah.
For the pepperoni, we do Greek oregano, which is really good.
Ooh, yeah.
So yeah, we call it expo finishes or dressing. Well, that sits and waits. I'll make one more pizza and I'll show you guys the uni oven in case you feel like you want to buy them.
Yeah, so what do you think of the uni? I get ads for those all the time, but they're a bit more expensive than just getting some pretty decent takeout pizza every once in a while for me.
Yeah, it's definitely for the home cook that really wants to perfect their pizza game. It's incredible. Well, before I dress this pizza, I'll take you guys for a ride.
Okay.
One second, guys.
All good.
You're all doing an impressive job.
I know. I wish I had
I've
thought
learned
to
so
pick up
much.
like store-bought pizza so I could have followed along, because I definitely did not make pizza dough in advance. That was
Yeah, and I've learned so much.
just like the whole how to not look like an amoeba with your pizza bit is super
The
helpful.
fold over thing is really fascinating.
Yeah, yeah.
I was thinking I used that for dough to make garlic knots. That's super cool.
Sorry, I'm in my garage.
So I've got the uni oven right here,
Ooh.
Ah,
and this is the uni Coda 16. So, I mean, I can make a 10-inch pizza. A 16-inch would be really tight in here, but it's great for 12-inch size pizzas. So,
Oh, I think we lost.
We lost him.
Yeah.
George, do you have one of those?
Not yet. Maybe next.
What is it called? Uni?
Unis.
It's like, I think it's OONI. I'm serious when I get ads
Yeah.
for them.
Huh.
Like,
I know, Jennifer, the Aldrich sisters, I think, have like a solo stove pizza oven, which was kind of nifty.
Oh, wow.
It was probably because I was probably putting too much sauce on. But I think my pizza came out soggy though. But again, I don't know that that was oven related.
Huh.
You think so, Euro?
He put very little sauce on there. It was just all just spread around and
I know, it was shocking.
Yeah.
It was far less than I put on.
yeah, exactly. So, just making the crust real quick, and then you guys will get to see how quickly it bakes in a really hot oven. And you'll be able to see the difference as well.
at your restaurant, do you use pizza ovens or just normal like restaurant ovens?
So we use this specialized.
Ooh, look at that, George. Awesome.
Oh yeah. Ooh. Whoa.
Crust is a little too big.
Oh,
Didn't get enough stretch in it, I think, but
It looks good.
Oh, nice.
yeah.
That puffy one looks real good.
Oh, nice. Beauties.
thank you.
Man.
Oh God, it looks crazy. Mine looks crazy.
So did you enjoy chemistry and physics at Vermont Academy, or is this just in connection with the baking that now you know all these things?
You know, I did love Mr. Fry when he was teaching physics. And I still remember the day that he was like, you know, if you had an electric car, you could, you know, use the braking to power the battery. And I was like, that's incredible. And then I drove a Tesla and I was like, oh my God, Mr. Fry was right. The baking really came from a passion from, I had a kid and I was just like, I need something to do. And so I put her on the front facing out so she could watch my hands. And I'd always loved to bake. I made my sister-in-law's wedding cake.
Wow.
And
Did you just say you made your sister-in-law's wedding cake?
Yeah.
yeah, like 2012.
Wow. That's cool.
Nope. Hold on. There we go. Is that better?
Wow, look at that. Nicole, my dog is right at one is asleep and one's poking at me too. Yours is so cute.
She's just craving attention right now. She's like,
Yeah, exactly. It's been
whining
too
at
much.
me, like staring up at me.
Here's Cocker. I don't know if you can see him.
Oh, yeah.
He's yawning. Like, okay, go sit down. Go sit down.
Those things are so cool.
Wow.
Oh, look at that. That's so cool.
You could do other things, but there's not a whole lot of other stuff where you want that kind of heat.
So is that close to like a wood-fired type of thing, but not wood-fired? I don't
Nope. Sorry, guys. I was on mute. Yeah, wood fire is generally in the 900 degrees range. That is the primary range for Neapolitan pizza. You can see how quickly that outside crust is rising on the back.
know. Yeah.
You can see
Oh,
the spotting there is called leoparding, and that's a really good sign of a pizza that has or a dough that has sugar available for caramelization.
Followed up so quickly.
no, right?
So you can see some of those. There's some flames on the ground there and on the pizza.
Oh, yeah.
That is some of the oil that is cooking off from the dough. In the back there, I don't know, it's hard to see, but
Wow.
So is the bottom of that thing a pizza stone?
yeah, there's a pizza stone in here. Yeah,
Wow.
hold on one second.
So it's really worth it to buy a pizza paddle.
So yeah,
Wow.
you can see the immediate caramelization. How I was telling you guys about the oven spring, how quickly that crust rose,
Look
Yeah.
at
and
that.
the difference. I mean, the only thing that makes good. Hold on one second.
Ouch.
Wow.
Oh, you're muted again, James. You're on mute.
It wouldn't go out.
So it started wider.
There you go.
There we go. All right. Sorry. Yeah, the only difference between good pizza that's homemade and really great pizza is just the heat of the oven. So if I give me 1 second.
Give us like a side by side.
Unfortunately, yeah, I can give you a little side by side.
Or is the first pizza already being consumed?
Very good guess, Nicole.
So yeah, there's the side by side.
Oh, wow.
So you can see the difference in the crust, the caramelization of the sugars on this one.
Yeah.
New York style pizzas are more like this because they bake at 550 or so, 600. So bake for a longer time, but that's what gives it the stereotypical golden brown. So this is very much Neapolitan with the leoparding. The only downside is this has no flop whatsoever. The one that baked longer. Meanwhile, this one has lots of flop. You can just see, it doesn't bake as quickly throughout. So, yeah, time and temperature. That is the name of the game.
Cool.
Let's see if that works. There we go. So, yeah, I tell you, the most incredible people I've met that are engineers love to make pizza for some reason. I met with this company based out of Italy that they're what they figured out was how many joules of energy go into a pizza dough when you're stretching it, how much heat over a 3-minute period. So if it takes 3 minutes to stretch a dough properly and get it to the right size and keep it there, they said, okay, well, if that takes X number of joules, then let's just condense that heat into a smaller amount of time and temperature. That's all we're dealing with. And so they made this incredible machine. It's a hydraulic press that you put the dough in the middle. The plates on the top and bottom are heated to 350 degrees. And it presses together for 1/8 of a second and squishes the dough out into its perfect size, and then it drops back down.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, when it comes to time and temperature, that's the name of the game.